The media lying again about Donald Trump, this time about him trying to create a unified Reich or something. I don't know. They think he's Hitler. It's stupid, but we'll give you the details. Also, the economy is still in the toilet, but MSNBC thinks you should be happy because you can get a $3 value meal. The border crisis gets even worse. Oh, and Ted Cruz gives a masterclass on how to answer the question, will you certify the next election? Well, you're going to want to see how he answered that question. We'll get to all of that and more with the Roundtable. This week's panelists, Senior Vice President of the Association of Mature American Citizens, Andy Mangione, host of the Chris Stigall Show podcast, Chris Stigall, and the Director of Independent Women's Network, Julie Gunlock. This week's show is presented by the Association of Mature American Citizens, AMAC. I'm Larry O'Connor. It's time for the Roundtable. This week, we got a glimpse of how the media plans to cover the presidential campaign, and I'm sure you'll all be surprised to learn that they've got a new one. Are you ready for it? Donald Trump is Hitler. Yeah, well, take a look at this.
Former president is under fire for a video he posted on social media that used language from Nazi Germany. The latest in a series of anti-Semitic and authoritarian statements from Trump and his campaign.
That phrase appearing 3 times, including under the headline, "What's next for America?"
A unified Reich, which is a word, of course, associated with Hitler's Third Reich during Nazi Germany.
He will create a unified Reich, echoing the Germans from World War II, if you're catching my drift.
Unified Reich. You heard it everywhere, over and over again. Even President Biden on his campaign feed put out a video highlighting it. Take a look at this.
What's next for America?
Is this on his official account? Wow. A unified Reich? That's Hitler's language. That's not America's. He cares about holding on to power. I care about you.
Well, you know how this works by now. Of course, the whole thing is fake. It's bogus. Kyle Becker offers a glimpse of exactly what this is. First, here is the actual video that Donald Trump put out. See if you can find where it says it was there. Did you miss it? It was about 1.5 seconds. Here, take a quick gander here at the screenshots. There's one of them. It's right there as it was zooming in. And right there where it said MAGA. And it turns out that this video animation of newspaper headlines and articles is actually literally like boilerplate graphics that anybody can buy anywhere, and they've been used in other ads as well that have nothing to do with politics. But here we go, Roundtable. It's Hitler, it's Nazis, and let's not forget, Chris Stigall, every time they compare Donald Trump to Hitler, what they're really saying is the people who vote for him and support him are Nazis. So they can get away with it this time?
First of all, I'm very naturally reacting to a cell phone video. Look, I mean, he can't read when he's clearly reading. Let's not, ask him to start acting. That's absurd. But okay, setting that aside, guys. The most amazing thing? It's a little tough to buy Reich talk coming on the heels of this pro-Hamas fun party that we've been having on campuses all over the country. The American left is cheering and demanding Joe Biden support a theocracy that subjugates women and kills literally murders the LGBTQ community.
And by the way, if I may, Chris, they were allies with Hitler, so they literally were part of the Third Reich.
Yes, if anybody's unifying the Third Reich, you're exactly right. It's the American left. It's the people Joe Biden is desperately trying to court in the upper Midwest right now.
But Julie Gunlock, George Stephanopoulos is very concerned about this. And you know all those suburban housewives that love their little George.
Yes, yes. People in my neighborhood have been drinking vodka ever since they saw that ad. But what I want to know is how many interns went blind looking for that? I mean, do they have sort of a warehouse of interns just going over these videos and looking at them, putting them under a microscope to find anything that could be offensive? This doesn't worry me at all. This is ridiculous. But yes, they are in full hysterical mode.
The answer to your rhetorical question is yes, in fact, there is a warehouse of people doing that. It's called Media Matters,
Media
and it's
Matters.
funded
Okay.
by George Soros and John Podesta. Andy Mangione, there are a lot of voters out there who we joke about it all the time, but they really were turned off by Donald Trump and mean tweets. And the reason they're doing this right now is they're trying to hit that nerve. Is it hitting that nerve?
I don't think it's going to work. I echo Chris's sentiment. This rhetoric is coming from an administration that is currently sending sympathy and condolences to the butcher of Tehran. Okay, you've got a situation where we've got Senator Tim Kaine expressing sympathy for a ruthless, bloodthirsty puppet of the Iranian supreme leader who endorsed death to America and death to Israel. They're trying to compare Donald Trump to Hitler when Joe Biden's State Department is offering their condolences as well. The well wishes coming from the administration were expressed all the while Iranians are celebrating in the street. They're celebrating this President Raisi's death on social media, and it's just more terror sympathizing, conveyed by the Biden administration, yet they have the unmitigated gall to call Donald Trump and his supporters Nazis.
Yeah, well put. And Julie, I'm torn on this because there are times when I think we've all acknowledged, oh, I wish he hadn't tweeted that. But this isn't one of those times. So I feel like this is the perfect example of the media crying wolf on something like this. Next time, maybe if Trump does tweet something inappropriate, it won't have an impact. Maybe this is actually a good thing they've done this.
Yeah, Larry, it doesn't matter because they will churn anything Trump does. He could do something completely appropriate and they will manage to turn it around and criticize him and make some sort of uh, comment about him being a Nazi. It really doesn't matter what Trump does. He cannot win in the view of the mainstream media. So, I mean, he can make, I agree with you. There are times where I'm like, please, don't do that. But again, he will always lose in their eyes.
You're with Independent Women's Forum, and I only partially, I'm being somewhat sarcastic when I talk about the suburban women, but that is a real thing.
It is.
And this, the truth doesn't matter. That's why we just took great pains showing everybody exactly what this was and that it was a completely bogus, made up story. But that doesn't change how George Stephanopoulos or Mika Brzezinski or anyone else covers
No,
it.
and what we try to do at IWF is we have done a lot of sort of messaging research, and women don't respond well to some of what Donald Trump does. They don't respond well. We actually try to be very gentle in some of our messaging because we know women prefer people to be civil. But the problem is I wish women knew that they were being manipulated, that whatever Trump does, they will put this spin on it. And many times it's not true. It's never true, frankly, their
Really
narrative on
isn't, yeah.
Trump.
Chris, this reminds me of when he overfed the koi in Japan, remember, by dumping the food into the lake?
Yes. And I was thinking, I don't know if Hitler's home was ever raided by his own government.
That's a good point. Who are the fascists in this picture exactly? With shoot to kill orders.
Yeah, shoot to kill. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, some Hitler. He's the worst Hitler ever.
Chris, and actually, along those same lines, I mean, if anyone is objectively looking at what's going on in the country and while the trial is going on, all Joe Biden and the Democrats have to talk about, and through their sock puppets in the media, is criminal trial, Stormy Daniels, and now unified Reich. It's fascinating how they're not talking about crime, border security, the economy. I mean, this is really what the next 6 months is going to be, isn't it? Because it's all they've got.
There was a story in the New York Times. They went to Philadelphia and interviewed 24 black voters. And the New York Times was stunned to find that only 8 of them were willing to say on the record they planned to vote for Joe Biden. And then the New York Times began to ask these black voters, why wouldn't you support Joe Biden? And shocker, they're concerned about safety and the border and their finances, not Hitler.
Yeah, it is quite a shock. Well, we'll see if this has an impact, but I think you're all sort of onto something here, that this is the media pushing it just a bit too far. They're getting hysterical and they're getting desperate, and it's only May. Every single Republican who does any media appearance for the next 6 months is going to have to be prepared to answer the same question. Will you accept the results of the 2024 presidential election? It's almost like they're setting us up for something. Well, Ted Cruz was on with Caitlin Collins on CNN last night, and I think he gave a pretty good example of how to respond to this. Take a look.
Attorney General, and my question was
it was the media. It was CNN that relentlessly pushed that propaganda. And by the way,
what
never
propaganda? That there was no widespread fraud in the election?
That voter fraud doesn't exist, and anyone who says it does is wearing a tinfoil hat. That is propaganda. And by the way, you never asked Hillary Clinton this. You never asked Stacey Abrams this. You never asked Al Gore this.
With all due respect,
and every
Senator,
one of them said the Republicans who won were illegitimate.
I haven't had any of them on my show. We'll talk to them. But I don't remember there being a president who was refusing to turn over the transition of power and facilitated it.
And Trump didn't either. Joe
My
Biden
question was about
became
2024.
President.
You did not answer it.
Let me say a final
Senator
point
Ted
for
Cruz,
you. You
we're out
said
of
they
time.
haven't come.
Thank you very much,
My
Senator
opponent
Ted
Colin
Cruz.
Allred hasn't either. He ought to come to your show.
Senator Ted Cruz, no answer to that question. Thank you very much. That's more on that interview and what we touched on earlier. Of course, you heard the news story about the latest Supreme Court justice. We talked about Justice Alito there. There is more news on that tonight.
That ended nicely, didn't it? Listen, this is exactly what you do. You push back. You don't give anything. And by the way, we only showed you about a minute of it. That went on for several minutes. Chris, do Republicans need to take this stance? Do they need to be combative right back to these hypocrites in the media?
It's brilliant, actually, and I'm pleased to see it because Marco Rubio, if you saw it, I'm sure you did on your show, did something similar with Kristen Welker last Sunday. Almost an identical exchange with the same interrupting by Kristen Welker as Caitlin Collins. Senator, all due respect, Senator, because they were killing it. They were crushing it. They were making the case over and over and over again. Democrats have been on the record repeatedly, including Hillary Clinton, refusing to accept the election, the legitimacy of the election, questioning the legitimacy of Trump's presidency. They've been saying it throughout his presidency. They've continued to say it. And they have no answer for it. So they just keep saying, Senator, all due respect. Well, I haven't had them on my show, Senator. It doesn't make it less true. I'm glad they're all on the same page.
And Andy, Republicans are notorious at being lousy at messaging, staying on message, and being consistent when they do media appearances. But maybe they've turned the page on this issue in particular.
Absolutely. I think what Senator Cruz and Senator Rubio provided were templates for every Republican to push back on this. And you have to be that assertive. You have to be almost rude. And as conservatives, we like the rule of law. We respect decorum, but we also have to know who we're dealing with here. And what we're dealing with is a propaganda machine of the DNC. And I like how the media always they always fall back on there was no widespread voter fraud. Well, there's no widespread. I'm going to quote my friend Hans von Spakovsky here. There's no widespread bank robberies, but we still have to take precautions against them. When we looked at the 2020 election, widespread, probably not. Okay, but it certainly was. There were some targeted incidences in some key states, so they fall back on that widespread, and they try to bludgeon Republicans who dare disagree with them. But boy, what Senator Cruz did was spot on.
And Julie, isn't there sort of a fatal flaw in the premise of the question in the first place? How on earth should any politician whose constitutional duty is to certify an election, why should they commit right now to certify an election that they've never actually observed? It hasn't occurred yet. Why you can't put yourself in that position.
I think Ted Cruz made that point in that clip. In a longer portion of it, he says, "Why should we even have election laws? Why not just throw everything out? Why don't we just throw elections out? What's the point? What's the point of listening to me?" And I want to say also the idea that they asked these politicians this question after Hillary Clinton, who is a traitor, cooked up these sleazy allegations against President Trump, caused millions of dollars to be spent in taxpayer dollars investigating those lies, tore this country apart for years with these allegations of Russia collusion. And they're not concerned about that. They're not concerned about what happened, what the Democrats cooked up to actually change an election to get him impeached. But they want us. I mean, the idea that we would just certify anything after what the Democrats pulled this last election is absurd.
Right. It's asking people, you're not on the jury yet, but will you vote to acquit if you do get on the jury?
Right.
Let's play a little game here. See, because listen, I love it when they mix it up. I love it when Ted Cruz argues like this. He's one of the best arguers. Not all of the Republicans on Capitol Hill are skilled debaters like Ted Cruz is. So I want to make it simple for them. Here's how I would answer the question if they asked me, will you certify the election? The answer should be this. As long as the Democrats don't cheat again, absolutely. Chris, is there a better way to do it? I think that sort of sums it up.
I love it, but here's what they say. And this is something I've harped on a lot on the show, too. Here's what they say to that. No judge has ... No judge. That's what they say over and over. Just like,
oh, yeah.
It's madness. It didn't happen because no judge has ruled on it, is what they say to that.
They also always trot out Chris Krebs, who is with CISO's DHS, and his quote, "There's never been a more secure election." I mean, they always, that alone, they say no more. They trot that out and you're supposed to shut up.
By the way, Andy, never been a more secure election. Actually, even if it is true, it doesn't negate the fact that in Georgia and in Pennsylvania and in Arizona, they counted ballots that didn't have valid signatures or dates on them. And you can't even get a paper trail to audit the ballots that were counted in Georgia, as we just learned in Fulton County. So, hey, it was secure, but we counted secure ballots that shouldn't have been counted.
What about the suitcases full of ballots they found in Detroit when they threw out the election observers, taped up the windows, pulled out the suitcases? People have sworn affidavits. They have witnessed this stuff. So, and they're going to fall back again on the widespread issue. Ted Cruz did a wonderful job. I think Republicans need to know the first thing they should say. Right, I say after you say, what you said with regard to as long as Democrats don't cheat, is I don't buy your premise. Why? I don't accept your premise.
Hey, Andy, I'll let you have the last word here because you are with the Association of Mature American Citizens. And I do worry that elderly Americans, people that are in long-term care facilities or hospice or other types of nursing facilities or nursing homes, and get concerned that they're being taken advantage of. In California, I know for a fact that there is a very robust ballot harvesting operation, and they target buildings like that. They target organizations that have many senior voters because they're vulnerable, and they often trust the person who's knocking on their door saying, yeah, give me your ballot, I'll take care of it for you. Is that something that the people at AMAC are concerned about and your membership is concerned about?
Yeah, we educate our members on this practice. We're in coalition with organizations that have set up hotlines. We make those hotlines available to our members if they see anything funny going on with their loved ones in an assisted living facility or a nursing home. We continually educate our members on this type of practice. And I mentioned it in California, it can be legal to harvest ballots, but we want people to be aware, to be with their loved ones when it's time to vote, to make sure that this manipulation is not taking place.
Terrific. Between your work and Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio beating up on the media over it, maybe we can finally get to a place where we'll have a legitimate election again. Hey, remember the border crisis? Yeah. The Democrats and Joe Biden would love you to forget about it, but it's not going away. Take a look at this chilling video from Bill Malugin, who covers the border for Fox News Channel.
Did you have to pay a cartel?
Yes.
How much?
Around 10,000.
10,000?
Yes. In fact, the American people is right, completely true. Who come into this country, they don't know. Well, okay, I'm good, but how if they're not good? How they're killer, psychopath, else? No guarantee of that. Why, like no security, no security check, no background check.
No security check, no background check. You're worrying about who's crossing the border?
Yes. Of course, me, because I'm like, people are not look normal.
This guy who just paid $10,000 to a human trafficker to come in from, I believe, Turkey, is actually being more honest about the border than Karine Jean-Pierre is when she speaks about it for the Biden administration. Julie, this is obviously a problem with our sovereignty. This is a problem with our national security, but this is also a problem with law and order and personal security in our neighborhoods. is this issue going to be the one for Donald Trump versus Joe Biden? Because it sure seems like it should be.
Absolutely. Look, what's also shocking is that guy cares more about the American public than the president. There is absolutely no doubt that crime and safety are a major concern for women, and I think that women are not being fooled. Chris mentioned earlier that people don't want to admit that they had interviewed some African Americans who didn't want to admit that they are voting for Trump. I think that's true for a lot of Democrat women.
And it's because of the safety and security issue for their neighborhoods, for themselves, for the children, too. Yeah. And Chris, there was a time when illegal immigration, border security, it really was just about jobs. That seemed to be the big talking point. They're taking American jobs, right? And then you'd be xenophobic, of course. But boy, this is so far reaching now when we're talking about tens of millions over the last few years.
I think one of the most effective ads the Trump campaign has done so far, and in my opinion, they should continue to run throughout the rest of this year, is two stories. One, the murder of Laken Riley in Georgia. Devastating. A young college girl with all her future in front of her, and an illegal alien murders her. Two, but in no particular order, really, the illegal aliens that beat the hell out of a New York City cop and were released on bail only to flip off the camera on the same day. Those two stories should be told over and over and over on repeat. And you win, in my view, in a sane world, in a landslide.
Andy, this week, Chuck Schumer is cynically representing the same border security and immigration bill that already got shot down by Republicans because there were no votes for it. I think they think this talking point, this lie that Republicans are blocking any kind of fix on the border, they think it's working. Is it working?
It's not working. I don't know what world these people live in, Larry. I've made that comment on this roundtable before. What's up is down, what's down is up with these people. The arrogance and the hubris of Democrats, it's always existed, and it will always continue to exist. But it's insulting. And we know that it's insulting because our members are telling us so. Our members are everyday Americans who just want a better future for their children and grandchildren, and they see what the Democrats are doing. They're not buying the rhetoric. I think Schumer is playing just another stupid game that won't work.
Well, and I think we can't overstate the national security implications, especially in a post-October 7th world, because just in Virginia this week, 2 Jordanian nationals, one of them on the terror watch list who were in the country illegally, tried to breach the gates at Quantico Marine Base. Now, it didn't end well for them, of course, but this is in Washington, D.C.'s backyard. This is in Virginia. And let's not forget, speaking of arrogance and insulting the American people's intelligence, this is what Jen Psaki and Rachel Maddow said about Virginians' concern about the border.
Some of these exit polls, I mean, I live in Virginia. Immigration was the #1 issue.
Yes.
I mean, again, these could change in Virginia.
Well, Virginia does have a border with West Virginia. Very, very contested area.
Build the wall. Like, what?
Yeah, Chris, you talk about the ads that the Trump campaign is doing. They should do an ad based on that, too, because that's sneering sarcasm about American people's grave concerns. That is the Democrats. That is the Biden administration.
Well, that's exactly right. And it uniquely was a desk of 5 sneering liberal women, well-to-do, well-protected liberal women. So, I would defer to Julie on that from the Independent Women's Forum. That's not men saying it. That's 5 women chuckling at the concerns of American security. So I wonder how that plays with the ladies.
Well, and Julie, you are also a Virginian. So are you next door neighbors with Jen Psaki?
No, but many of my neighbors are liberal, very well-to-do, and I might say white women, who, are often shocked. I see on the neighborhood listserv when there's a carjacking, near our neighborhood. And they're like, what in the world? What is happening? They're just shocked by this because they are protected in these sort of tonier neighborhoods where they don't have to deal with this. But it is encroaching. It is coming into their neighborhoods. Again, they're shocked. But they, all they do is they watch MSNBC and see sneering liberals like this making fun of women who are very concerned or who might not live in these safe areas of town. So I don't think this goes over well with women. I think this is the kind of thing that people go, I get the feeling things are not right in this world. And, they may show that in the voting booth.
Yeah, we're going to let that be the last word because, listen, immigration and border security are paramount right now, and all the polls do show it, despite Jen Psaki's incredulous reaction to it. And the more we see of the porous border, the worse it's going to get for Biden. Don't be surprised if he actually does finally execute some executive action to make it look like he's doing something. When we talk about the transgender agenda and how it affects our schools and women's sports and other various aspects of our culture, whether you're going to get fired for using the wrong pronoun, we often overlook one very important aspect of this, and that has to do with women's prisons. It's been a major, major safety issue for women who are incarcerated when they find themselves in intimate locations with biological men. Now, this bubbled up to the top of the news cycle this week as Senator Ted Cruz, in a confirmation hearing for a judge, confronted the judge over what she has done with regard to putting very dangerous men in prison with women. Take a look at this.
This case involves a male defendant who raped a 9-year-old boy, raped a 17-year-old girl. Was he guilty of that?
I hope so, because she pled guilty to it.
He was a he when he did this.
That's correct.
1 year after being released again, he was convicted of having child pornography. Is that correct?
Abhorrent conduct.
Okay. And this individual, 6'2", biologically a man. A minute ago, you said this individual was, quote, I wrote it down, sober and entirely a female. That phrase struck me as remarkable. Did this individual have male genitalia?
Yes.
So you took a 6'2" serial rapist, serial child rapist with male genitalia, and he said, you know, I'd like to be in a women's prison. And your answer was, that sounds great to me. Let me ask you something. The other women in that prison, do they have any rights?
Is that a question you're
yes,
asking me?
The other women in that prison, do they have any rights?
Of course.
Do they have the right not to have a 6'2" man who is a repeat serial rapist put in as their cellmate?
Senator Cruz, I considered the facts presented to me, and I reached a decision.
I asked you a question.
I
asked you a question. Do they have a right not to have a 6'2" man who is a serial rapist put in as their cellmate? Do those women have a right to that?
Every person who's incarcerated has the right to be safe in their space.
But you didn't think so. You didn't think so.
Julie Gunlock, Independent Women's Forum, is all over this issue when it comes to children being mutilated and convinced to do so by doctors or by school administrators. And certainly you've been in the forefront of saving women's sports and the Title IX rewrite. But what about this issue? What about the safety of women in prison?
This makes me so mad. It's hard for me to keep my composure here because I am so disgusted by what this judge did, and I'm so grateful to Ted Cruz for calling her out. I do want to make a plug. IWF has been following this very closely, and my colleague Kelsey Bowler has been doing a series of documentaries. This one, and particularly on women's prisons and what's going on when they allow biological males, intact biological males, into these women's prisons. That documentary series is called Cruel and Unusual Punishment, and that is perfectly titled because what they are doing to women who have a right to safety, even if they are convicted of a crime, these women have a right to safety and to not being raped by biological males who are sometimes cellmates with these women. It is absolutely horrifying, and I'm sorry. I know this is a three-person panel, but where are the women's groups? Where are the feminist organizations? I mean, IWF is all over this, but where are these traditional women, these sort of mainstream women's groups? They're silent. Where are the feminists? They're silent. I mean, they're so wound up about a flag being in someone's yard, but they don't focus on women being raped in prison by biological males who were put there by judges.
Well said, and never apologize for being passionate about an issue like this. That's why you're here. Chris, there's also something so unnerving about this judge insisting on using the she pronoun when hearing about what this horrible man did.
It's pit of hell stuff, and it's really, it's central to the argument that I think people are trying to inflict on our children. A godless society where ultimately there is no such thing as a creator, and you can just, it's a jump ball when you're born what you want to be. And if you change your mind later, so be it. We're careening, of course, toward that, starting at a very, very young age, surgically altering kids. We know that's a multi-billion dollar industry. So perpetuating this lie not only has real world consequences for women in prisons, women in locker rooms, women on sports teams. This goes right to the heart of our culture, a godless culture with no creator. And if you can eliminate that, then in God we trust. Who? God who?
Andy, when you see a sitting senator have to even make this argument, I don't know about your membership at AMAC, but I watch this and I think, why are we even having to have this conversation? How did this happen so quickly in our society that you have to make the case for not putting a 6'2" male rapist in a prison with women?
Larry, this is a huge issue for our members. They have made it very clear where they stand on the transgender issue, and they fear for their grandchildren. I mean, how can you equate transgenderism to senior citizens? Well, I'll connect those dots for you. Our members are concerned about what their children are being taught in school, and they're concerned about the grooming that's going on with regard to transgenderism, as well as the mutilating surgeries that are sometimes taking place without parental consent. We're on the record as supporting bills and helping to get legislation passed in states like Ohio and Tennessee, working on legislation in Louisiana that specifically addresses women's safe spaces, locker rooms, changing areas, and yes, prisons and battered women's shelters. So Louisiana's on the right track. Should this legislation pass, and it's got great bipartisan support, it would serve as a model on the federal level.
Chris, there's also an interesting aspect of this where we feel like we elect a president and that's going to take care of everything. Maybe our senators, maybe our governor. But look at the power judges have. And we often ignore that. We don't pay attention, especially conservatives. The left, they get it. They know the kind of power judges have, and that's why they get involved here. It's stunning to learn that this judge was able to do this without any real oversight.
Yeah, this is again, it's not to be redundant. It is a cultural issue, and it is one no election is going to fix. And it's why, in my estimation, not to bring up sort of an irrelevant point, but it's a broader point, which is, the Harrison Butker commencement speech of a couple of weeks ago. Why was that met with such visceral hatred? It's because it's telling hard truths. It's standing up to secular culture, staring it in the face and saying, no, that's not true. Here's what's true. And we're not backing off it. That causes hissing and shrieking and writhing. And what we must all do, it's not about elections, it's about a culture. Wresting this madness away and taking back control of a sane, truthful conversation. And every one of us can do it, whether you're a kicker, whether you're a talk show host, whether you're a homemaker, or president of the United States. We're all duty bound to take the wheel back.
Julie, I'm going to let you have the last word on this one because we're all sort of using the same language, culture. They use this term culture war, I think, to scare some voters. It's like, oh yeah, I'm fiscally conservative. I don't want high taxes. I want a strong economy, but I don't like getting messy with all those culture war things. Look at what's happened as we've sort of looked away from the culture war. If we're one of those, Paul Ryan green eye shade conservatives.
Yeah, that's why they always say it's book banning. But they don't show the books, and that's really important. And I think, I have some friends that are sort of non-political, and she brought that up to me, and I showed her the pictures, and she was so stunned. But to her, and I asked her about that, and she said, well, all I've heard was it was book banning. All I've heard is it was book banning. And this is how they win these culture wars. They keep people in the dark. They tell half truths. They never really show the evidence. They kind of skirt around it, and they change words. They change the definition of words. Or in the case of women, they claim there really is no definition. So I think it's really, really important to be vocal about this stuff, to be out there. And I'm really glad to see that a lot of Republicans are not shying away from these issues.
Yeah, and I'll say it one more time. I say it often, and it needs to be repeated. Sure, call it a culture war. We didn't start the culture war.
That's right.
But we're definitely going to fight in it now that it's engaged, and ultimately we will win. We've got God on our side. But there's a reason why you hear Democrats and their friends in the media talking about nonsense. Trump's a criminal and he's going to shred the Constitution. We won't have another presidential election. They want this entire election to be about democracy is at stake because they can't talk about the economy. Although we've got an interesting example. Stephanie Ruhle on MSNBC, She decided to go there. She wanted to tell y'all how great the economy actually is. Watch her make her case.
And now a new report from the Fed shows people are still struggling to cover day-to-day expenses, even as inflation has slowed. But some big consumer brands are beginning to take action. Target says it is cutting prices on 5,000 essential items, things like milk, butter, pet food. Wendy's is now offering a $3 breakfast deal, and rivals like McDonald's are offering new, lower-priced value meals. Here to discuss, an old friend of mine, Austin Goolsbee, president and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. We need an economic explainer. People are confused, they're exhausted, but they're also doing quite well. So I want to start with prices. They've been an issue for everyone. What is your take when you hear about big consumer brands actually cutting prices?
Good, but you've had inflation that got way too high in the U.S. and in other countries around the world. Incomes didn't keep up with that. Now inflation slowed in 2023, actually quite a lot. Inflation came down almost as much as it's ever come down.
So there you go, Andy. I was stunned when I saw this. We need an explainer. People are doing quite well. They can get a $3 value meal at Wendy's. What are they complaining about? Andy, are people doing quite well and they're just not understanding how great things are?
They're not doing well. And I've got some personal experience just yesterday. Now, I don't live in Virginia. I know that you all are in higher income areas and the cost of living might be higher. I'm in Kentucky. I'm in the bluegrass state. I put gas in my car yesterday, $4.39. Okay, a gallon. Then on Mother's Day, I went out to buy a couple of cards, one for me and one for my sons for Mother's Day. 2 cards, $18. I don't ever remember spending $18 on 2 greeting cards before. Just a small example. People are not doing well, and this is just so insulting. I get passionate about this because we hear from our members, many of whom are on fixed incomes. They either have enough money to pay for food or get their medicines. They're putting off surgical procedures, some optional surgical procedures, because the money simply isn't there. So it's not. This is just so insulting. They don't need anything explained to them.
Sure, they're putting off a medical procedure, Andy, but they can get a $3 value meal at Wendy's. What the hell are they complaining about? Chris, you're a talk show host. You're a podcaster. You're a communicator. Can you ever imagine talking to your audience this way that you just saw at MSNBC?
I love Andy's passion for his members, and let me just say, as the son of retired people, senior citizens, I have had 2 of them reach out to me. I won't name them, but I'll just say this: 2 seniors in my life who are both retired. One is a retired school teacher. One is retired from banking. Both of whom have saved and done reasonably well for themselves. They've been retired for a few years. One just took a job out of sheer terror she wasn't going to have enough money to live off of. Another texted me the other day and said, "This is the first time in my retired life that I've actually been worried I don't have enough set aside to make it." So that is a very real story in my own family of 2 older folks, very responsible, who've led great lives in their 70s, who are now scared they don't have enough to get by for the remaining years of their lives. So Stephanie Rule, you can shove your $3 value meal.
But Julie, we've seen this pattern now. They're taking their cue from the White House. Pete Buttigieg has done media hits saying pretty much the same thing.
He also safely walks his dog, by the way.
That's right. Oh, things in D.C. are safe. I can walk my dog to the Capitol. The message from this White House, and by extension, the reelection campaign for Joe Biden, is you people are morons. You have no idea how great things are. I can't imagine that working.
Yeah. Personal story for me, too. I am the mother of 3 teenage boys. You can imagine what my food costs are. This is another case of gaslighting the American public, whether it's crime, whether it's the border, a variety of things. The talking points from the White House have gone out, and you hear the same sort of sneering from the media class. Stephanie Rule is a multimillionaire. She doesn't have to worry about looking for those deals. But I do. I really do. And Andy mentioned gas, everything. It is crippling. It is crippling. And again, I think that for some people, like the people in really nice neighborhoods who make millions of dollars, they might be fooled. But real people go to the grocery store most days. Most people have to gas up. They know life is not good.
I want to swing back around the roundtable to Chris and then finishing with Andy. Chris, there is something insidious. I mean, part of this is a media story. Obviously, we're talking about the economy, but there's something insidious about the millionaire Stephanie Ruhle interviewing a chairman of the Federal Reserve out of Chicago. I mean, it's the elite talking to the elite and mentioning that Target is lowering prices. That really does personify exactly what's wrong with the Manhattan-based media elite.
That's precisely right. They don't get out. It's very emblematic, much like when Donald Trump went to East Palestine, Ohio, and Joe Biden chose to not. It's J.D. Vance hillbilly elegy. There's that forgotten masses thing that emanates whenever these people are in power in Manhattan and Washington, D.C. They look down their snoots from their, and I know it's a cliche, but it happens every time. They look down their snoots from their ivory tower and say, what is it you peasants are so unhappy about? Things are fine. There are cranes all over Washington, D.C. They do this every time they take power.
Let them eat Wendy's, I guess they're saying. And Andy, I'm old enough to remember, I know it's a cliche, but I am old enough to remember when George Herbert Walker Bush was lambasted in the 92 campaign because he was surprised at a grocery scanner for milk. By the way, that was a media lie. He wasn't expressing wonder about it. But it's this idea that, you're so out of touch, you don't know what real people are going through. Biden's got a real blind spot there, doesn't he?
An incredible blind spot. And so do the people that advise him. And so do his cabinet members. These are the people that I pray for. I do. I pray for them that their hearts are turned and they put the best interest of the country in front of their ideological preferences. Okay, to help, everyday Americans who are struggling with Bidenomics. My wife clips coupons and we go to Ollie's. I would love to run into Stephanie Ruhle at an Ollie's. I think I would pull out my phone and take her picture if I could. But what an echo chamber these people reside in.
She has the help do that, Andy. Come on. Don't be so crude. We'll leave it with that. But whether the media wants to admit it or not, I think some things are still true in presidential politics. It still is the economy. Stupid. That's it for this week's Roundtable. We'll be back next time, same place. In the meantime, my name's Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry.